Here I am to tell you of a girl named Blythe and her tremendous strife. There was a young woman named Blythe. She eventually got into a much-needed strife. Blythe was a talented clothier. She was made of dreams that could scare. Blythe often feared her master's strong use of power. She was always being bossed around with attitude that was very sour. She had a strong dislike for people who had too much money. She felt that those people were extremely greedy. Blythe spent most of her free time with those that were needy. Her parents were separated at a very young age, her father never being present in her life, not for one stage. Blythe was extremely quiet and shy, but she did not want to go through life just to make it by. She had a dream of having an independent clothing store. She wanted to make clothes for mainly the poor. Blythe was 24 years old. At the age of 14, she learned how to sew, and her heart had been sold. Her mother had told her to always follow her dreams. She wanted to make clothes of all different seams. Blythe was constantly undermined by her king. She was constantly in solitude, and all she did was sing. Most of her time was spent sewing the royalties' clothing. One day Blythe was put to work to make new cloaks. She sewed each seam with such delicate strokes. As usual, Blythe was using each color as instructed. Once she was finished, she began to make her clothing for the poor once more. The king suddenly walked in, screaming, saying she wasn't doing her work and to do more. Blythe pointed at the cloaks to show him that she was done. All the king did was say that she must work until the rise of the sun. For being a noble clothier, she realized she was treated poorly. She got upset because she knew he was treating her horribly. When the morning had come, Blythe had began to work some more. She was extremely exhausted from being forced to stay late and work the night before. The way she was treated was beginning to bother her a lot. She knew that respect and gratefulness was something she sought. The cloaks were not due to the king and the queen until the next day. She began to wonder if the queen was treated horribly by the king in the same way. Although she was his wife, Blythe believed that it was more about being dominant. If this was so, why would the king still be with him when the solution was so prominent? As she measured the fabric, she started to wonder if she should say something to him. She then realized she could never, so she continued to trim. Her thoughts were quickly interrupted when she heard a loud scream. She quickly peered out the window and saw the queen's tears come down in a stream. It was then that she knew her thoughts were right. She wanted to go and help the queen, but the thought of the king's wrath filled her with fright. Suddenly, she dropped her work and opened the door to her workspace. She looked out the door and motioned to the queen to join her, but to come in a fast pace. Blythe's adrenaline was pumping through her veins. As the queen hurried over to hide from the king, she remembered his restraints. As Blythe scanned the queen over, she saw her legs were bruised, her cuts and scrapes from whence she had fallen. She watched as they oozed. Blythe quickly ushered the queen into the room, taking her quietly in the snap, and boom! Blythe quickly slammed the door. The queen looked out at her in complete horror. She started crying and apologized. She said that they had never even socialized. Blythe quickly told her that it would be okay. Next, she didn't even know what to say. Quickly, Blythe got the medical kit. She felt like she was younger when she played the nurse's skit. Blythe finally got the courage to ask the queen what happened. The queen began to explain what she had endured. She explained that they had been fighting. As she explained, again she began crying. She began to explain once more how the king had been upset with her. This was something Blythe would infer. Blythe got her some water. The queen began to saunter. Finally, as about 45 minutes passed, the queen decided she needed to go at last. Blythe made sure that she'd be okay, once again not knowing what to say. All throughout that night, Blythe couldn't sleep. Finally, the next morning, she remembered the cloaks were due. All of her mind had gone askew. She had wondered how the queen was feeling, knowing she was probably grieving. The queen had probably felt pressured to go today, Blythe just wanted to tell her that everything would be okay. She walked through the garden, her thoughts traveling. She wondered if the king's heart had hardened. She gathered for her daily tea. Her tea always made her happy as could be. She returned to the shop to continue to work. Finally, when 5 o'clock had come, she pulled the cloaks out. Finally, for the ball, the day was here where the king and queen would go and laugh and tell jokes. She knew they'd be expecting them in a blink. When she entered their room, the queen looked excited. When Blythe was so filled with relief, she could hardly hide it. The king came over with a look of horror. Blythe got nervous. Her thoughts screamed, "Oh God, what more?" He grabbed his cloak aggressively. His eyes scanned it possessively. He began to scream that the blue was too deep. Blythe's heart sank down a slope so steep. The queen gave Blythe a look of terror. Blythe knew this is what had to be an error. The king had asked her what she had done, and that is when the rage had begun. He threw the cloak on the ground, so Blythe responded with a quick turnaround. She marched out of their room with anger. She got to her workspace and took everything off the hanger. She set it all on fire and walked out as it burned. Blythe knew this treatment was much less than she had earned. The queen followed suit and left the king. She did not want whatever pain he had to bring. Eventually, Blythe followed her dreams and opened her own store. The queen and her lived together as best friends some more. Blythe had learned that her dreams were worth more than being treated so poor. And so it was that the king had left town, Blythe and the queen so happy they'd never frown.